as technology advances, the need for human experiences is going to increase as well. And so I think it's really critical that these two kind of facets of our business walk leg and arm in arm.
Ideas, by definition, are always fragile.
No tolerance for failure, no innovation.
The best ideas have to win.
This is the Synthesize Pod from Brightidea. It's your weekly hit of insights and actionable strategies for innovation-minded professionals that just want to get shit done. Welcome to Season 1, Just Say Hackathon.
All right. We're back, and we've got one of my favorite people in the whole world here. Katlin, welcome.
I thought he was going to say me.
Thank you.
Well,
I know.
we're Margaret. Come on.
There's a little
Let's not
competition
state the
going on
obvious.
for number one.
Yeah, all right, Caitlin.
All right. Well, welcome back. Good to see you, Margaret. And welcome, Katlin. We asked Katlin to come on. Katlin and I worked together for a couple of years now. Was it 3 years? 4 years?
I think so. Yeah,
And
3 or 4.
Caitlin is head of product at Brightidea, so we work really closely, and just thought it'd be good to get that other perspective on hackathons, the kind of the toolmaker perspective. And sometimes it's easy to just run an event, and it's a whole nother story to kind of engineer a product for an event, or engineer a product that can be used by multiple companies, multiple departments. So, Caitlin, it's okay with you. Maybe we'll start with some of your background and kind of how you got to where you're at, and then we can kind of get into the actual product and solution around Hackathon.
My background ranges everything from healthcare to retail on the product side. I feel like product management careers are always interesting because nobody goes to school and comes out and says I want to be a product manager. I know exactly what I want to do. But I kind of went on the in-house side as well as agency, a lot of different industries. But I think what was really interesting about coming to Brightidea was the position right before. I actually was embedded in a innovation team and in an R&D team in-house. So I feel like every time I talk to our customers, it's like this deep, oh, I get it. It's not even just trying to bond with them. I feel the hustle. I feel the throes. Every pain point that they've had, I've watched and witnessed. Specifically, I was on the new product development and go-to-market strategy. So really focusing on employee engagement, ideation, all the way through to activation. So how do you take that idea and actually launch it into the market and see what happens? So definitely very excited when I came on with Brightidea just to kind of embed that knowledge in a broader scale.
So why don't we back up a little bit? Obviously, you're at Cambia Health, which is healthcare, but let's go way back. What were your hobbies in high school?
Young college
What was your
me.
Yeah.
Oh man, I was the person that had a million hobbies. So I think I went from wanting to be a vet until you realize the sad part of that to maybe a marine biologist to I love arguing, so maybe a lawyer, but it ended up, I went to Ohio State University in Ohio, so I am Midwest born, and got a job right out of college working for a Columbus College of Art and Design, which was a local art school. And it was a team of I want to say 10 of us on the administrative side. So I was doing their PR, their marketing, all of their alumni relations, managing their website. And I started to really love the technical aspect. So managing the blog, their website, doing a couple redesigns there, all just in-house scrappy. And that's kind of where I started to swoop into that product management angle and got a job on the agency side, which I think everybody, sink or swim when you go on that side. You're busy, you're swamped, you're working with a plethora of clients. And then you start to realize the importance of translating desires with technical specs and, the hustle of that world, and just fell in love with it.
How did you land at Cambia?
Yeah, so couple, what do they say? Couple different lives on the retail side. Ended up working retail, put me on the e-commerce and kind of growth spectrum, and worked for actually an organization in Ohio called Cardinal Health. So I say it jokingly, it's one of the biggest pharmaceutical distribution companies in the world. But I did worked on their pharmaceutical e-commerce system. And then kind of personal life put Oregon on the radar for us. So moved out here in 2020 and was fortunate enough to kind of land a job at Cambia Health. and focusing right on their product development and innovation team. So one of the first innovations that I was working on pulling to market was a app where, I don't know if anybody's gone to the doctor's office, and 2 months later you get a random bill, and then 2 days later you get a bill that's different from the first bill with a different amount. And then 3 weeks later, you get another bill. So the pain point of just managing all of that bills, how do I know what to pay? Sometimes you have to call, sometimes you can log in. So pulling that all in one place. And I think that was kind of healthcare is a hard beast to swallow, and it's hard to understand. And so being able to kind of be on that side where like, hey, there's a problem here. So let's not be under pharmaceutical or underneath the provider network and really focus on what the customer wants and what the customer needs there. So that was kind of the first project and how those dots and those bridges connected.
So you were doing e-commerce, and then when you at Cardinal, and then when you shifted to Cambia, you went right into the innovation team?
Yep, right into the innovation team specifically for that product. So I think that was the trigger when they kind of saw my background of like the dot connector between not only healthcare, but obviously the massive amount of e-commerce. And when you kind of tie e-commerce with retail versus e-commerce and healthcare, there's a lot of similarities as far as user expectations, but the amount of bureaucracy, red tape, legal things to consider within healthcare just changes the game a little bit. So yeah.
So, and then what was the makeup of the team there? Like, you know, was it 5 people? Was it 10 people? Give a shout out to Mohan.
Yeah, Mohan, he was our chief innovation officer. He's still in the market doing awesome stuff. But Mohan, yeah, great leadership and mentor for me. He organized his team, I think, aspirationally. It's what all innovation teams want to look like as far as the makeup. He focused that we were all just a military task force. So he had us in people that were focused on employee engagement. He had people that were focused on prototyping. And then he had people focused on research and analytics. And between those three, you could come in and in a single meeting, if you had a partner in crime with you, you could kind of tackle 360, whatever problem you're trying to talk about. It sounds like what I just described was a massive team. There's about 6 of us kind of arming all of those legs. So it was definitely a small and lean but mighty crew. I think when I look back, you always, when you look at your career, like, oh, I did a cool project, or, you know, that was a really cool thing that I launched to the customer. But honestly, like the people that I worked with there, that's the stamp of like, I will always remember that job for sure.
So you guys, so what leg of that were you? You were in the prototyping zone?
I was in the prototype and go to market. Yep. So I focused on, once the idea came in, we had that engagement crew focused on what the initiative should be run. You know, how do you kind of work and partner and sponsor with different departments? That included for lack of a better term, coaches to really mentor the people within the employee base, really make sure they heard their voice was heard. How can they also see that it's not just because we have an innovation title, they can be a part of that? So that group kind of went through that. And once something was vetted and started to get pitched, I came in at the pitch process, figuring out what would this look like? What does it, technically start to come together? What's that digital experience? And then trying to find some legs for it and build it out.
Give us the outlines of Cambia. Is it, is it a 50,000 person company? What's the scale of them?
Massive. So what's interesting is Cambia, if you view it as, when I was there, is I would say the parent company or the umbrella company. And then underneath, the name that you'll recognize is Blue Cross Blue Shield. So that was one of the main profitable sectors of the business. But really what Cambia was trying to do is build a portfolio around healthcare, understanding that it's not just about insurance networks and building provider networks. It was, to this point, what's a digital experience look like to better that and really try to impact healthcare. But yeah, it's pretty large footprint. I know they've shifted slightly in their kind of trajectory of really honing in on insurance as their bread and butter, and where they're, as every company is right now, trying to focus on the 1 to 2 strategic imperatives that are going to drive functional value and like monetary gains. But yeah, they definitely were structuring it as a portfolio of healthcare offerings. Yep.
And you guys were, in that capacity, you were spinning up whole, lines of business, whole, standalone businesses, business units. So basically set up as an innovation lab, but also doing some engagement with the rest of the org. So kind of a hybrid labs programs in kind of our view.
Yeah, and I think that's what's interesting is the arms of the business had connective tissue, but if you look at the success portfolio of that innovation team, they just added companies and subsidiaries to Cambia for sure.
And then somewhere along the way we connected. So I guess we can disclose our secret that Katlin cold outreach to me on LinkedIn and said,
LinkedIn stalked you.
And I was like, oh yeah, sure. So we started chatting and then, you came in and then kind of got promoted pretty quickly up to our head of product. So it's been great partnering with you over the past few years. And I think that diverse perspective of not just product, but what do you need to wrap around the product and what do you how do you take the product to market, and that full kind of entrepreneurial perspective has been really, really valuable and helpful.
Yeah,
so
appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Oh my gosh, thanks for answering my LinkedIn stalking.
Well, it can happen, so
it does work.
If there's great talented people, don't hesitate to do it. I think it's actually a really great sign, right? If somebody, in your case, you had worked in the area, you'd worked with our product, so the person's excited about that space and wants to have an impact in that space. So it's really, really cool.
It's funny that I feel like I've talked to you for 2 years now, Katlin, and I never realized that you were part of an innovation team before you joined. But that makes so much sense of why you build the product and the way you do, and kind of your deep understanding of the audience.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely a badge of honor. Yeah.
We'll be doing something and we'll be designing something for a startup, and Caitlin will be like, oh, let's build this for Slack, and Caitlin will be like, no, let's build it for MS Teams because that's what our customers use.
The large got that corporate blood.
SharePoint, all that stuff.
I refuse to back away from SharePoint. Always can't get me on Google Drive.
All right. So why don't we get into Hackathon and maybe we can just chat about that, or I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to say about background.
No, I want to go way back. What were you like as a kid?
A motor mouth.
Okay.
So I have a very, which definitely hasn't stuck. I've definitely grown out of that. But I think, my family dynamic, I have a massive family, and I'm going to say something that might put me in a stereotypical bucket, but I am the youngest child.
Youngest
so
of
I
how
have
many?
kind of I have a merge of a family. So I have, my parents both had children before they met and then had me. So we, have some blended family, and definitely the youngest. So I felt like probably a little bit of I have to speak up to be heard, or, I'm doing interesting things over here too, guys. The confidence to kind of compete with my older siblings. Yeah. So definitely a motor mouth, definitely still just probably as cheery most of the time as I am now. So
did you feel at all like an only child since you were like your parents' only child together? Was there an interesting dynamic of like older siblings but feeling also like an only child?
Absolutely. So especially if you want the deep story. So my dad adopted then my mom's kids, and so we grew up in a household where I had siblings in the house 24/7, but I was significantly younger. So by the time that I entered middle school, I was the only one in the house. So it was kind of the best of both worlds, or potentially the con of both worlds, when you do have a big family, but at the same time you get the attention as the young one, which is sometimes good, sometimes bad. But yeah, it was definitely, I think, unique, which is why sometimes I feel like stereotypically I don't fit in the youngest child, or sometimes only child, which again comes with its bears. Yeah.
So I don't think I realized that you were the only child. Oh, you don't have any natural siblings. Is that right?
Half siblings.
I do not have any, blood siblings from both parents.
Both parents. I don't think I realized that. I thought you had more in that bucket.
Yeah. Confusing family. Gotta love it. Big Irish family.
Sounds like good preparation for working in a corporation where you have like 3 bosses.
Oh yeah. Big personalities, navigating, negotiating. I feel like you learn everything in childhood.
Well, I know there's a story about some grilling competition, but I don't know if we can segue to that. But anyway, we can come back to it later.
McNally Throwdown every year.
What is that? Is And you do that every year? I remember seeing a picture where you guys had 3 of the same grills or something like that. Was that to just make sure that the grilling was fair?
An extremely competitive family. So my dad hosts McNally Challenges, which is my maiden name. And anything from, we had a Fear Factor kind of swing on one, which I don't think would be something we should ever do again. We had a McNally Olympics, which is more like athletic prowess. I won that challenge. And
did that include hurdles or?
Oh, it was like anything from you had to stand on one foot and do math equations to, zip lining and 3-legged races. And then, the one summer we had cooking competitions. So we were going to do a burger off of who could make the best burger. And everybody started complaining about rules. And so my dad bought us all 3 the same charcoal grill to keep it even and aligned. And then I also won that challenge. So not to brag. But I'm a 2-time McNally champion.
You're kind of giving off oldest energy and not youngest energy to me.
Yeah. Want to jump into the meat of Hackathon?
Well, hold on. Where we just left off, your dad was buying duplicate grills to keep it fair. So let's get to the bottom of that one before we move on.
So
what was on your burger?
So it was Thanksgiving weekend. So I did a Thanksgiving themed burger. I'd like to say that the competition was steep. I don't think my siblings will listen to this, so it's fine. But my one brother thought he could just put chorizo right on the grill and it would form a burger. That wasn't working. Other brother forgot buns, and so there was some bartering to try to buy buns off of somebody else. But I did, because Thanksgiving, I did a turkey burger with brie and homemade cranberry sauce. And then I think the clincher was we also had a hot toddy with some whiskey for the judges, because we did invite neighborhood judges to keep it even.
Pandering works every time.
Everything has to do with fairness.
And served it on the trophy, which was a giant oar that I won the previous year at the Olympics. So it was just kind of a little over the top. I hit the nail on the head. Yeah.
Did you do it at a distance?
Do you guys not do that at your get-togethers? I'm confused. Is this not normal?
No.
I'm adding it in, though. I feel inspired that needs to happen.
Yeah.
I feel I know more than I did. I thought I knew her before. Now I feel I have a whole new lens.
We didn't even get into the hurdling story. I mean, I guess we can leave that one.
I have so many.
Side.
Listen, next, if you guys are open for suggestions on season 2, just embarrassing life stories, I'm here.
All right. Let's get into Hackathon. So where do we start, Caitlin? What is Hackathon? Why did we decide to focus on it? What is the ideal customer profile? What did our research reveal with our empathy? Let's get into it.
I think what's interesting for me is when I think about the question, I think the second question you had of why Brightidea focuses on Hackathon, I think there's 2 arms of the argument. I think there's the logistical side and then there's the emotional side. And from a logistical standpoint, there's arguments to run a hackathon from the business of you have a disengaged workforce. It's all the stuff that you read about in today's, economic frustrations. You have this acceleration need, a lot of technical disruptions without people knowing how to respond. You have, companies, as we talked about earlier, just tightening their purse strings, really trying to focus in and hone in on the things that are going to drive value and monetary drivers. And so I think that's the logistical side where it's, you're going to engage your workforce, you're going to run an event, you're pulling everybody together to focus. But then the emotional side, which is a nod to, I'm sure, some of the stories that you've heard from our customers throughout this podcast and you guys talking to them, is when you talk to somebody that has participated in a hackathon, whether it was a participant, a finalist that actually ended up winning, a judge, an event manager, after you kind of go through the throes of the event, there is just this unfiltered joy and exhilaration around it. Everybody starts beaming, their shoulders come back. And I think that is real, that is tangible. And I think that's what's exciting is at Brightidea, we're trying to figure out how to package that from a solution standpoint, not just product features, but what's going on in the mindset? How do you just bottle that magic and make it repeatable so people can run it in their organization and get those logistical benefits, but also figure out how to get that, again, unfiltered, just exhilaration and excitement and joy when they participate.
It definitely feels like those are the stories, is just this idea of like stoking the passion, stoking the leaning in, stoking the commitment back into the workforce. And I think that makes a lot of sense, where it's like, to do that, you have to understand the logistics of it. And the thing that I think has been really interesting in these past conversations is this like idea of the event itself should foster creativity and should foster like limitless thinking, but the logistics behind it are very repeatable. And like even the organization of innovation teams, like there's so much structure and ops and logistics to actually get to the point where you can create enough space to play in for creativity. And I think that dichotomy has been really interesting to me.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the best metaphor I have is, I'm sure each of you guys remember like the field day in elementary school. It's like you go in, you're not going to remember what games you played in, but just like the amount of fun you had, the anticipation that you're going to be doing it the next year, the amount of camaraderie with your 6-year-old peers. But then the fact that the teachers probably spent like 3 months planning that, and there had to be guardrails. You're basically herding cats and little toddlers the entire time the event's going on. But it's just, it's magical. Field day to hackathon in the corporate world. Both of them are the same.
That's hysterical. I love that metaphor.
Yeah, I think there is that real dichotomy of like how much work and organization and checklists have to go into it just to create this little bit of space for people to have a field day. Yeah, I know even when we ran our Brightidea internal hackathon, it was, we spent like, 2 months, like, and we were like, trying to fit things on the calendar, and people are like, oh, we've got this, we've got a release, we've got that, and this person's going to be traveling, and it was just like, just to create those 2 days of time for people to get together.
Carving
it was like,
out.
Multi-month planning things.
Yeah,
more than I
expected show up
it
to
would
it.
be.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Exactly. Maybe it makes sense to talk about the distinction between product and solution, and why that's important.
Yeah, I think when we decided that, again, there's something magical and timely with hackathons going on right now, we knew it wasn't going to be a standard, product process where you come up with you have a backlog, you prioritize it, you start to do customer interviews, user testing, and then you release it. We took a step back to say there's something here where it's not just about feature first driven decisions. It's something that has to look at, we define solution as everything you need to solve a problem. So really taking a step back and understanding the key roles within a hackathon and why they each kind of bring their own burden and, value to the map, as well as understanding, to the point, Matt, you just made around the amount of planning and the philosophy around a hackathon. And we have this great value at Brightidea that we do have this coupling of platform and services. And so figuring out the magic that can happen on the platform in the system also needs to happen outside. Because sure, right now I'm on Chrome, I'm on my browser, but there's so much that happens outside of that system as far as event management, talking to your peers, utilizing other tools. And so really trying to figure out how we can kind of pull all of that together. I think that's what kind of brings a little bit of the Brightidea element to it.
I have a question there. So I think it can be challenging to have product and services live in the same solution, right? Because if you need to have somebody as a person do a service, there's a chance that could be productized and then thus removed from needing to be human intervention. So I'm curious how you think about that, especially with hackathons. Like how much of the services team should exist forever versus like how much of that is just until the functionality of the product or new features or new user experience can actually like augment that.
Yeah, great question. I think what's interesting is as a product team, sure, there have been times that we've leaned on the crutch of, oh, well, we have professional services, so they can kind of like go that extra mile for that thing that we sliced out. Not every product person, I think, gets their perfect promised land out on slice one. And it's the reality in which we live in. And I think, we have used that as a crutch, to be completely honest, in the past. But I think what's interesting about looking at Hackathon and how those then add value to each other is the platform, yes, is tangibly doing the work, the workflow, the repeatable process. It's getting everything stood up and managed through the endpoint. But what the services team is coming in and doing is coaching. Because again, a lot is going to come down to the philosophy of this hackathon, trying to discern what theme you want to do. How do you convince your stakeholders to lean into this? How do you start to think about, how do I prove the ROI to be able to do this again? And so that coaching element, if you really kind of look at it through that lens, is they're embedded in your team to help make your vision a reality. And oftentimes that's not within the platform, and I don't think it should be. It's stuff that happens outside of the systems. So I think like that's the interesting thing when you look at it through a specific use case or specific solution, is their role also evolves and changes. So Matt, I don't know if you have any kind of 2 cents on that, or go ahead, Margaret.
I was going to say, I always think about the biggest failure point in a lot of software, especially when it's billed as like a life-saving tool in terms of like B2B tech, which obviously is not really saving, in our world, is not really saving lives, is that software can't solve people problems. Like you can implement software, but if there is not changes in whatever it is, culture or operations or adoption of that tool or whatever it is. And to your point, like it seems like introducing hackathons into a business and into a culture of the business requires a lot of cultural change and people change. And that's something that software fundamentally just can't do.
Absolutely. When you get on a roller coaster, there's somebody there guiding you, telling you how to put the straps on, and then telling you how to exit. That roller coaster is taking you for the ride, and there's nobody kind of, motorizing it by their feet pedaling. But there are things that need to happen where you do have to have that human engagement. I think Sam Altman said this in an interview, but as technology advances, the need for human experiences is going to increase as well. And so I think it's really critical that these two kind of facets of our business walk leg and arm in arm, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question I've thought a lot about, is can technology or tool influence behavior or, society? And, the metaphor I always use, I mean, certainly if someone hates their boss, like adding a task management tool isn't going to help them work well together, it's, there's certain problems can't solve. But I do think that technology very much influences how we behave. And, if you've ever taken a TV out of a room or something, or had your Wi-Fi go down, it dramatically impacts what you do in that room, if there's a TV in it or not, or if you have internet or not. So I definitely think that the tools can create the environment for things to happen, but I think trying to, pinpoint solve individual to individual relationships is a little bit trickier to do with that. But I'm curious, we talked a little bit about solutions. Maybe we can back up to the problem. What problem are we trying to solve, and who are we trying to solve it for?
Yeah, I think there's, again, the problem of you have your employer and then the organization, the employees, and those two have very distinct problems, but the solution overlapped. So from an employer standpoint, that organization, they are confronted with the current economic times. They have a business that's maybe high cash flow, but struggling to realize growth. Maybe they're sitting kind of trying to figure out how to, the red ocean of competition that they have. We're starting to see some, leaders within different industries kind of disrupt that market. You have technology coming out, and it's how do they make a difference and drive towards their strategic vision and just, discern what that looks like. And the logistical side of hackathons, disengaged workforce, figuring out how to implement those changes. And then on the employee side, you have a problem of them feeling disconnected from the business strategy, or feeling like they might not have a voice in the direction that the business is moving in. And so by kind of pulling those together and realizing the weakness spots where it's like, how do I apply focus to everybody within the organization? How do I communicate what I want these people to focus on and where I think the disruptions can happen? How do I make sure that, best idea wins, that ideas can come from anywhere, no matter your title, no matter your ranking, your standing, your previous, workforce background, and pulling that all together. Usually innovation management falls within that, specifically hackathons and those event-based targets. Like our sweet spot is enterprise-wide hackathons. And I think that's where we're seeing that kind of those values of employee problems and employee problems.
And maybe you can talk about the person who's running the event, the event coordinator.
Hardest job.
Historically, these people have kind of, used like a Eventbrite or something like that to get people to sign up, and then maybe like an Excel spreadsheet to kind of track the projects. But what problems is the coordinator facing that you help with?
Yeah, I feel like what's interesting about people that say, hey, I'm going to be the person that runs this hackathon, they are then burdened with about 82 different jobs that they have to do to make that event successful. If you think about anything, if
their day job, right?
Yeah, in addition to their day job. Yeah. I mean, think about even just on a micro scale, like when you throw a housewarming party or a birthday party, it's like you're running around and multitasking in 8 different things, and only probably 2 of those things do you excel at. So they're coming in and they're saying, I understand the value and I am committed to my business to running this event. And so in translating what that means, they're going to have to, and it's very different depending if it's hybrid, remote, in person, but they're going to have to work on engagement. How am I inviting these people? How am I making sure they know what's happening? How am I hand-holding them throughout the process and communicating with them? I have to work through anything from catering and space management to making sure I have the right judges and I know, how I'm going to be ranking and scoring these ideas. If you start to kind of look at the whole puzzle, and our services team and the coaches that work on Hackathon do a great job of lining this up for that person to understand the commitment that they have to kind of walk into to do this. And they're not surprised, there's no gotchas, but I mean, that role, you never see somebody, I think, finish up a hackathon and they're not fatigued, but they were excited by what just happened. And I think that's the thing we want to make sure is we get, they might have some bruises along the way, but we get them out of the event alive. And I think that role is honestly one of the hardest roles, I think, when you look at event management and innovation management. Absolutely.
Is that a goal of like a success metric, even anecdotal, is like this person used Brightidea Hackathon and then ran a second one and didn't run away?
Yeah, absolutely. If it's repeatable, if it's smooth sailing, if you walk out with like, wow, that
willing
was fun,
to run a second one,
I might want to, make it a little bit like more streamlined in here in these parts. But yeah, willing to do it again, I think is the big success criteria there.
Pritesh said before he was using it, he didn't sleep for 2 days because he had like people handing him issues like all night, and then he's like, I actually got to sleep for like 8 hours this last one.
Pritesh is a great example of, I think before they were using Hackathon, they were using, to your point, Matt, like some sort of event invite, and then they'd use a Microsoft form to get the idea, and then they'd have a Google Doc where you could see all the ideas, and then have the judges would have to attend meetings to review them. Like everything just becomes disconnected and just adds more weight for that event manager to coordinate. Yeah.
How did you guys go about, researching what, obviously a lot of people probably think they're fine with what they've got, the tools they use today, their hackathon runs fine. How did you go about, uncovering unmet needs or kind of researching what would motivate someone to kind of step up to a more purpose-built platform?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's, as far as thinking about, product development and product roadmap, there's definitely a template in which every product manager kind of follows. And I think when we dove into this and we knew that it was going to have to approach from, software meets services, it was really interesting of just getting on the phone and talking to these people, sitting in on part of their hackathon planning, pulling in not just our customers and really listening to them, because Every product person knows that a customer can say, hey, I want this feature, and it's not actually going to fix the problem that they have without talking to them. They're trying to figure out what the solution or the remedy is without fully understanding where the pain is coming from. So being able to talk to our customers, we did probably close to 30 different clients we engaged with just to sit with them, talk with them, figure out what their roles are, even accessing not just the gatekeeper of the event manager, but also talking to the judges and saying like, hey, how did you find out that you're going to be a judge? How did you feel about that? Were you nervous? How did the whole, experience go? What would you change? Talking to people that participated and figuring out, sure, what was that vulnerability felt like? Were you nervous? How did you know what to do? And kind of talking to those different people really helped us understand. And then at Brightidea, we kind of follow a process where we do that user testing. I would say we do a lot of co-creation, which is kind of risky because you can kind of get pulled into some weird rabbit holes as far as what the product or the solution should look like. But sitting with customers, showing them wireframes, talking about things, even showing them, we had a discussion around our playbook and just like our content that we're going to be providing. Like, does this make sense? Does this encapsulate the stuff that you were going through? And then, like I said, product template, you go through the competitive audit, you figure out what's out there as well. How do we make our product stand out? How do we make it, 10 times better or have those key differentiation? So I think like that was really the difference in our mapping, was it wasn't just the standard, do some interviews, build some wireframes, get a prototype out there. It was really about bringing the people along and figuring out what their deep empathy was. Yeah.
And I imagine building for very innovative, likely product-minded, engineering-minded people and building a product for them. It's kind of like, this episode is all about metaphors today. We're just heavy on the metaphors.
I like it.
But it's kind of like, a chef then cooking for their like chef friend or whatever it might be, to be like, the stakes are high to build a product for these types of folks, I imagine. How do you feel about that?
Absolutely. And, we talked about my background about being on their shoes. So much in that world has changed so drastically. And I don't believe that I am, nor actually anybody is ever going to be an expert in innovation, because it constantly evolves and changes. And so being able to talk to these people, I think it's really more about, it's vulnerability, showing how you are interpreting their feelings is huge. I mean, again, going back to metaphors, if you're talking in front of a chef, you're cooking for a chef, you're trying to interpret what their taste buds and how they're going to react and how they want that presentation to look like. So when you're developing a solution for somebody, you're taking their insights, like you're their therapist, you're hearing their pain point, and then you're trying to tell them how you can fix it. And you might be even 3 degrees off, and that's going to feel just like viscerally wrong. So it definitely is nerve-wracking, and hearing these people that also each organization has its own flavor of innovation. So it adds this fun nuance of this organization is bought in, they have a sponsor that wants to invest in it, just go, 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 versus this organization that's really struggling with communicating ROI, and they just don't know how to get their bearings or get that engagement rolling. And so you're really trying to develop for macro different problems. And so you have to hone in on like, okay, well, how can I solve this event issue that you have? But you're absolutely right. It's a vulnerability. It's making sure you kind of always have your ears on, and you're not trying to immediately interpret or say like, oh, I get it. We'll do it this way over here, and that'll fix their problem. It's like, we all have to come to realize that we have the same issues and the same kind of pain points, and how do we solve for it? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, as you look over all that research and you look at kind of the features you ultimately roadmapped and built, like, what were the insights, the problems, the kind of empathy for the customer, and how did that connect to the new things that you brought into the product?
Yeah. I think for our product strategy in the past couple of years, it's been very easy for us, especially with who we talk to, who we have access to design solutions for that admin, which is who we've been talking about, that event manager, and really trying to, the key thing we try to do for them constantly is just make it easier. make it as frictionless, make it as guided, give them optionality, but kind of make it so they don't have to think too hard on that stuff, and that we just kind of are there for them before they even have thought about it. We're handing them the next step before they're even there. So a lot of that work went into just workflow automation, schedulers, rules, engine enhancements. They just wear so many hats. We wanted to pull that together. But I think what really excites me about the offering that we pulled together is we kind of looked outside of that admin, and as we've talked about, talking to those judges and those participants. And I think that's where some key insights and kind of different stuff that we haven't really dabbled in. And, you know, with the participant, we've talked about, they come into hackathon and, you know, there's different variants of how that person wants to participate. They may say, I have an idea. I'm nervous to share it. It's vulnerable. I don't really know a lot of people in the organization that can help me. And I'm, you know, nervous about reaching out to people. Do I just like Slack them? Like, that's kind of where that energy is coming from. Versus you have maybe a more of an extrovert that has a group of, you know, they have their posse, they have their team members that they want to work with, but they really have no idea how they want to participate or how do they come up with an idea for what's next. You have those solo entrepreneurs that come in and they might have a skill set and they don't know how to apply it. So looking at all of those individuals was really fascinating, knowing that it isn't just, hey, we're running a hackathon, you come in with your idea, you have a developer with you, cool, pitch it, see what happens. But really focusing on those people needed to be guided. And they needed to be guided in different ways through the platform and through the experience based on what they were looking to achieve or trying to achieve. That output came through things like onboarding flows and wizards to help guide them along based on kind of the role they were playing. We did a lot of work on pulling together some of our collaborative spaces that we've worked on in the past year. So we launched kind of Project Room where somebody could be within a whiteboard and really start to mature their idea before they had to submit it. Spent a lot of time on just, I would call it like our Brightidea dating participant stuff, where you're trying to figure out like, how do I find somebody that doesn't have a team or like has this skill set because I really want it. So all of that stuff kind of came together to help fuel them during what we call like the incubate process. And all of that, I think, added just a ton of value to help them secure themselves before they're in their final pitch or in their final presentation of how do I make sure we set them up to success to be there.
I think that incubate phase, you know, sets apart the solution that you've created from the other options that are available in the marketplace. So can you just double click on that? I mean, you talked a little bit about onboarding, but what else is going on in that incubate phase? How does that relate to the event and all this other stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think about, you know, the milestones of a hackathon event, sure, there's registration, submitting an idea, presenting the idea, getting the winner, etc. But if you almost map that out, the registration to submitting an idea to presenting, there's a lot of stuff that happens in between those steps that there's really nothing there to catch it or create a safety net or guide it along. And if you think about actually the word incubate, and if you imagine this little egg that needs to get warmed up and toasted before it's ready for prime time, that's what we tried to accomplish within the platform and within our kind of methodology around how do you get people in the system. Sure, top of the funnel, they're in, they're engaged, participants are there, they're kind of standing in this theoretical room. And then how do you make sure they have the tools and the capabilities and the support to do what they need to do? And so during incubate is the time that you're team building, you're kicking, maybe you might have multiple ideas kind of in the works, trying to figure out which one is going to be successful or which one's going to derive the most value interpreted as the winning idea.
Incubates before the live event, before the live kind of hacking event?
Correct. Before everybody's in a room, throwing on headphones, going to the grind. Yep.
How long does that period last for? And then I guess people are just kind of connecting virtually?
Yeah, what we see a lot of people, that's the time that a lot of, you know, people are within project rooms, people are chatting about, you know, what do we want to work on? How do we mature this? Oh, you have this skill set. Maybe we need this. A lot of the activities happening virtually, a lot of the activities happening in and outside the platform. But yeah, it's definitely time just for that raw collaboration, that raw idea definition. Where we've seen the sweet spot is about 2 to 3 weeks before your event launch. I think it gives enough time for people to get warmed up. You get some of the stragglers that, maybe weren't committed that they wanted to do a hackathon until they started to see other people's ideas come in, so they feel safe to submit. And you also get the early adopters kind of setting the stage for like, I know what I want to do. This is going to be the winning idea. And we even did it, when the Brightidea internal hackathon we ran with our employee base, our incubate phase was about a month long. And I think it was really good because you also saw teams evolving and changing as the idea shifted. And that was really interesting, where an idea started to go a specific direction and, you started to isolate and pull in different people and different expertise to make that idea the most successful, versus some people jumping ship because they're like, oh, I actually want to work on this divergent idea because I think that one might be interesting. So I think it sets people up for this time just to kind of like get their feet underneath them a little bit more, figure out, go in a little bit stronger with who their peer group's going to be and how the event's going to go.
Yeah, I think it was also helpful if people needed like, tools or some hardware or something like that. It kind of like was an opportunity to be like, oh, if I do this, I'm going to need these products, so I have to order
access
that.
to whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love the idea of the idea changing. But like the hackathon project or idea, I love the thought of giving it enough space for it to kind of grow and evolve in a direction that might make more sense, rather than saying, pick an idea, hackathons tomorrow, stick with it for a day. It's almost like that beginning bit of it will kind of help determine what's inside the egg.
Yeah. And I think I've participated in hackathons and have witnessed them in both ways, where sometimes you go into the event and that's when the theme is announced. So it's almost like a fire drill. But I think what also, organically happens when you have that time to sit on that idea is that individual or that participant is just going to be so much more passionate and deep rooted in believing that this will solve the business problem. And that passion, that giving the participant the ability to kind of step away from their day job and commit to this is huge, because that person's then going to be a trailblazer for you like down the road. So I think that, there's perks just from an event management standpoint. And then there's this emotional, like, they're going to get more committed to their idea. They're going to be more vocal, even if the event finishes and they weren't a finalist. You bet your bottom dollar that they're going to bring it up, a couple weeks after, making sure, can I find a home for this in some department, in some team? Yeah, so I think there's kind of some organic stuff that happens behind the scenes as well.
You need a little bit of time to fall in love with your idea, to feel ownership over it.
Love that. Mm-hmm.
And to find other people that are interested in that or might be able to help you.
Yeah, the right fit.
I know one thing that came up as you guys were working on this was kind of close near variants that weren't quite hackathons. So, there some people, do what we would call like a pitch competition, and then, but they call it a hackathon. Or some people, we start hearing about this thing called an ideathon. So, any thoughts on that? Say that again.
Oh, ideathon, pitchathon. Yeah. I think
exactly.
It's
Toyotathon.
Sponsorship. I think what's interesting about that, and it's like one of those dances too, where you want to be a purist when you're developing a solution. Like, that's not a hackathon. Sorry. Like, talk to you later. But I think what's interesting is if you look at idea events where there is a time box opportunity around top of funnel, engaging people, there's 1 to 5 days of something happening, and the output is a winner, quote unquote, or winners. And I think when you look at ideathons and pitchathons, the commonality there is it's when you start to engage outside groups and broader audience. And so you think about a hackathon and your first kind of visual that comes to mind is engineers coding. And I think what we're seeing is that hackathons, everybody can add value. I mean, even internally, our winning idea wasn't from an engineer or product manager. It can come from finance. It can come from sales. It's any idea that you think is going to drive business value based on whatever the theme is set. So that meaning that your output might not be a GitHub link. It might not be an active prototype that can be downloaded. It may be a quote unquote more like a pitch where it's a presentation or a 5-minute, walking them through a business model or a business case. And I think that's what's interesting is you have all these tiny variants that take you from the pure example of what a hackathon is. And that doesn't mean that those aren't solving the same problem that we talked about around disengaged workforce or, participant, value there, packaging that magic. It's still happening, but just the definition is slightly different, which means that what they need to best serve that audience might slightly tweak as well. So it is this messy gray area of ideathon to hackathon, and really trying to make sure before we engage with a client, do we know where they sit? It's okay if they don't know, but we need to kind of help them craft and understand, are you coming out of this with something tactically that you will be able to build, quote unquote, to better your business? Or are you coming out of here to seek funding? Is it more of a Shark Tank, but you're running it within a collapse timeline, and making sure they understand what that end value and what they're trying to discover is?
Yeah, I think the market's still trying to figure out what those terms mean exactly. Or, like I said earlier, it's easy to just host the event that you want to host. But when you're starting to engineer solutions and against that, you have to get super precise and OCD about the definitions of these things.
Yeah. Or else you're comparing apples to oranges, and you're going to have a lot of participants upset that they're not in different groupings. Absolutely.
I think one of the key distinctions there, for me, a pitch event was always, it's kind of like a business plan asking for or proposal asking for capital to go forward. I don't know that hackathon needs to be laden with all that pressure. I think it can just be people working on projects but the core of the hackathon tends to be this prototyping, this building, like you said, exercise. And then ideathon is kind of sliding right into the middle of all that, which is maybe it's an idea you have and you work on it. So it's not purely technical in nature. It's not necessarily code that results from it. But it could be an internal business process, or just building a marketing collateral or something like that, something you feel you need. So it'll be interesting to watch that over the next year or two, how those kind of how that terminology evolves in the marketplace.
Yeah, terminology evolution, figuring out, where industries are going to sit, where departments are going to sit based on what their final presentations look like. I think at the end of the day, if you focus on the macro, you're all trying to march towards the same drum, but you can get, again, goes back to that 5% divergence. If you come in with certain expectations, you'll come out of it a little off. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Well, I think the other rise of this is that with technology moving the way that it is, and generative AI coding tools that help even non-technical people code prototypes and code software using their own natural language prompts. I think that's really interesting of does it unlock this broader audience or broader community base to be interested in actual hackathons of building products, not just having an idea or not just having a pitch, but actually getting into it and building something tangible as either a prototype or working version, because so many more people might have a individual product idea, but not be the engineer that, or not be able to convince an engineer to work on it with them.
Oh yeah, that's huge. A big portion of success is accessibility of knowledge and tools. And so this world that we're living in just breaks down all of those barriers. Matt, I know I talked a lot about why it was so important for Brightidea to focus right now on hackathons, but I am curious, just from your perspective, why do you think hackathons matter right now in this point in time, and why should Brightidea be focusing on them?
I think, as we talked about, it's a really unique time where, you've had these people be, some people working from home, working remote, and they're a little bit disengaged, frankly, and I'm sure there's some people who take an afternoon off and don't mention it to their boss, right? So I think it's a really good opportunity to pull those people back in, and at the same time, you've got this massive acceleration going on, AI and the space race and new forms of energy and just all sorts of multiple vectors of innovation you kind of running in parallel. So it's really hard to just be a everyday business manager and just think about, what's my product going to look like next year, or what are my internal processes going to look like next year, or what sort of people do we need. So I think it's good to give people space to play with and explore those, those new technologies, those new capabilities, because you can't really learn it from a book, right? Like if you just read a book on what AI can do, like it's not gonna really help you. You have to go and play with the chatbot, and you have to, play with the image generation and really reconceptualize, how you're going to do your work with this kind of co-pilot or this partner in crime, so to speak. I think that's really key. And then, broadly for Brightidea, it's a really interesting moment to, our historically our customer has been these innovation teams that the company set up to kind of support innovation. And increasingly there's all these other just, line of business managers or department managers that are saying, I need to innovate, maybe not always in lockstep with that centralized innovation team, and I need tools for myself. So I think hackathon's a really interesting business opportunity because it sits at the intersection of that. You can have the innovation team being an enabler of this, kind of providing the tools and providing some of the expertise, but then you can also just have someone who's ahead of product or head of, a CTO or something like that, just say, we've been running hackathons for 3 years, and, we want to take this to the next level and have a hybrid remote component to it. So it's really interesting, market opportunity. And I think that, it's interesting because it plays on both sides of that kind of wall of, the corporate innovation teams on the one hand, and then just kind of everyday, business leaders that are trying to cultivate that innovation mindset in their teams.
We call that a large and growing TAM, right?
Indeed. That's always good for the investors.
I'm curious, you just talked about kind of different variables or ways that hackathons can manifest. And I know in talking with our customers, how did you navigate where that kind of hackathon sweet spot was? Because there's so many different ways to run an event, so many different ways to engage the workforce. How did we kind of start to navigate that and discern what to focus on?
Yeah, so we've had the hackathon app for, it's probably been, 10 years now, maybe somewhere between 8 to 10 years. And what that's interesting is that's like a template initiative that customers could use and play with and, tell us what they need. And so, what was interesting about that is they kind of pulled that in 5 or 6 different directions. There was, running a hackathon, outside the company at a university to kind of build the brand of the company and to recruit. And then there was the hackathon in the, kind of more traditional and the, CTO runs it. There were people who just wanted to run one hackathon. It was like this big company-wide thing. Then there were companies that were running, 10 or 20 hackathons a year, and they needed kind of all this, support for spinning them up and reporting across hackathons. So it was this big kind of market segmentation matrix just within the world of hackathon. And where we thought we could add the most value was, kind of, as you mentioned, the company-wide, single event, internal to the company, often company-wide or division-wide, kind of broad spectrum. And I think that, the reason we thought we were kind of uniquely suited to help there was we have this super robust platform that we've been building for 20 years. It has all sorts of bells and whistles, and you can change colors and buttons and workflows and rules engine and connect it to Slack and Jira and all this stuff. And then you have these services people professional services coaches who've been working with companies doing this for the past few years. And they kind of just know all those problems that you're going to run into, like the schedule's going to take longer than you want. And, you might have people, showing up with ready-made projects or, whatever, all the kind of common pitfalls. And the fusion of the two of those, I think, is really, really compelling because you can have really great consultants that go in and kind of say, we'll help you run a hackathon. And they, maybe the deliverable is kind of project management and a slide deck and they help that day. Then you have platform providers that have tools that can help you. But I think when you have people who have access to this, best in class platform, and they've been working on it for the past like 3 years doing these types of things, then they know how to get in and tweak all little options and all little knobs to give the customer exactly what they want. And oftentimes the large corporates can be very demanding, especially when these things are high visibility. The CEO or the business unit leader might say, we're not launching that unless that button says project instead of idea. I don't like the word idea. I like the word project. And so the ability to go in there and just, change that label, or I don't want this to be blue. I want it to be orange. Right. So like, you'd be surprised how many of those things there are, like kind of coming into that last week before the event launches. And I think there's some real magic there when you take someone who's worked with, global 100 companies, on these big types of events, and you empower them with this kind of super robust, deep platform, and then allow them to match what the customer is asking for in a very precise way. They don't have to compromise their process to what the tool does. The tool can adapt to their process. I think that's really compelling. And when you're doing these things for these, when it has senior leadership visibility, that becomes all the more important. Or if there's some program manager or coordinator that's doing this for the first time, and you can keep them out of hot water because you can kind of give them advance notice of some of the problems that are going to come, that's priceless, because, we worked with one company as a IT company, and they were doing their first ever global hackathon, and, 30% of their workforce showed up, to this event. It's like something like, I think 20 or 30,000 people showed up. So, you don't really get a second chance at that. So it's really important to kind of know what's coming, to know what the possible pitfalls are, and to be able to work around the corporate political environment to give them exactly what they want. And I think that's why we kind of zoomed in on that kind of company-wide hackathon as a key place to start. And then obviously if you can do one event good, you can work on an enterprise platform that supports many events and that type of thing.
Yeah, as Margaret said, the success factor is getting them to do it a second time. But I love
exactly.
what you said about, I think that's interesting, Call, is typically when you're working with bigger agencies and they have a services offering, they come in and they go through a discovery and a research period, and then they just hand you a playbook and then they disappear. And it's like that playbook only gets you as far as maybe asking for dollars in investment from your business. And then it's almost like they just left you stranded on an island to figure out how to build a boat and come back home then. And I know that I'm not going to say any agency names, but there's a lot that excel in that kind of model. And I think that that's the difference, is we're in it until you're done. Like, we are in it until you get out of the event and you're successful. And I think that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And come back for future events, right? So then there's that context and knowledge around what happened the first time that you don't want to repeat the second time.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah, building that muscle memory. Yeah, I think McKinsey is kind of famous for the $500,000 PowerPoint slide deck, right? So
you said it, I didn't say it.
Yeah, don't come after us, McKinsey. Yeah. That was Matt.
But I do think there's a lower level of granularity. I mean, they might be able to help with what are the focus areas, what are our goals for this, but like when you get down to like what are the criteria that the judges are going to judge on, and how do we convey that back to the group of participants that are going to be involved, like it's a forcing function to answer those questions, because you have to go configure the scorecard to do that, and you have to go if you're virtual, you have to go update the kind of the homepage of the event to convey what you're looking for. So I just think it forces you to kind of come below the waterline on some of those more detailed things and get those right, and having someone who's helped with that, their last 3 projects were doing, the same exact thing is really, really helpful. All right. Thanks, Katlin. Thanks for making the time and sharing all your insights.
Yeah. Huge thank you guys for inviting me. Yeah, this was great.
If anyone is listening to this podcast and they think they know someone else that might benefit from what we're talking about, if you enjoyed the content and there's someone you want to share, we'd love for you to share, because it's word of mouth referrals that will make this grow. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Synthesize Pod. For more resources on how to bring innovation to the forefront of your organization, sign up for our newsletter at brightidea.com. That's brightidea.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.